That's my favorite part. All right, so we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'll take a motion to open the meeting. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, Ricky?
Yes.
Barbara? Yes. Carol?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
All right, 5 yeses. We are open for business. All right, so the first thing, normally at the beginning of the meeting, what we do is we start with public comment. I do want to make a little bit of a statement this evening. It was brought to my attention that sometimes our desks are covered with lots of pieces of paper, things that we need to address. And for folks who are looking at this just remotely, somebody said that sometimes it looks like I'm having a sidebar with Dan. And so I just want to be sure that everyone knows we're not conducting business outside of this. It's usually just like, that's the one or that one we got emailed to us or something like that. But it isn't ever that we're having a side conversation that pertains to what we're doing, but we're not being inclusive. So I just want to be sure that everybody understands that. It's never my intention to not conduct our business the way that it's intended. So I just want to be sure that I'm clear about that. And the next thing is public comment. So that is the portion of the meeting where you are able to bring things to the select board's attention that may not be on this evening's agenda, but that you feel like we need to know about. So that being said, is there anyone here who'd like to bring something forward for public comment? Linda Bacon.
I would like, I'm Linda Bacon, I'm chair of the Board of Parks and Recreation. And over the last couple of meetings, there have been a number of things brought to the board's attention about cleaning and maintenance at the Belgrade Center for All Seasons, and one issue at the Belgrade Community Center. I have an 8-page document that I don't have a printer at the moment, so I couldn't print it out. I emailed it to Anthony. I didn't know that he has gotten it yet, but the document includes some pictures of some issues. I'm gonna open it here. I'm not hooked to Zoom, so I can't really share the screen at the moment, but I just want to kind of share a laundry list of issues there.
I just.
Okay.
I'm not here to point fingers, but.
So, and
more
I
to-
want to be clear that we cannot point fingers and we cannot say names. So.
So I
if-
can't say Lily, Bill, Gail, I can't.
No, you can say, you could say someone who previously worked at the center or something like that, but we can't use names. We can't do any of that in open session without the parties being present.
Okay. No, I wasn't planning on pointing any fingers, but.
No, I just want, I was like, let me just be clear.
People that work.
Let's preempt that.
Okay, I do want to, before I get started, remind everybody how well the center did financially in 2018 and in years prior, mostly due to the after-school program, Kids Zone, Camp Golden Pond, and Camp Bloom. Now, all of these programs have suffered greatly as a result of COVID restrictions, particularly at the beginning. Back in the profitable days, we had a number of people working there on various aspects of programming, including cleaning and running different aspects. Like Camp Bloom was run by one individual for the most part. There was an assistant, there was a director, and then very often someone was hired to deal with the Camp Golden Pond itself. One of those people, the people that cleaned, also worked on a lot of the programs because that person was very good with the kids. And he took care of routine cleaning issues. Well, that person ended up leaving, other people left, and during COVID, it has ended up being pared down to pretty much one person, the rec director. And most of you probably already know that our present rec director has submitted her resignation. And I'm very disappointed in that because I thought that she was going to be really good. She attended during her younger years and absolutely loved BJ, and really, I thought she was going to be able to jumpstart the programs. So there's a couple of things that really bothered. And one was the purchase of a new swim raft that was made without speaking to the rec director, interim director, or the Board of Parks and Rec, and then was just given away. Now, in other situations, getting rid of a surplus item purchased with taxpayer money, there's a legal procedure to be able to do that. And this was ended up being, as far as what I heard, was purchased out of the programming budget. And if nobody that was involved with the program knew that it was being purchased, and it just happened to something wrong there. Also, at one of the meetings, it was announced that the North Belgrade Center, Community Center, was being changed to a senior center. I spoke with Anthony about this, and he assured me that they needed a mailing address, and that was all it was. Although their mail has been coming to the center. And he receives minutes from this group, and they plan to purchase a couch, TV, lockers, and other items for the space. That facility used to generate about $10,000 of annual rental income. Nobody talked to the rec board about this. Nobody talked to the rec director about this. It just happened. There are security cameras that have been non-functional for quite some time. The alarm system needs to have 2 phone lines and fails on a daily basis, has to be cleared every single morning, because when the alarm company pings the center to make sure that the system is working, it disconnects the telephone, and the signal to ping back does not happen. So it fails on a daily basis. When the printer is used, the lights dim. Apparently an MMA inspection was done back in August. I knew nothing about it, nobody told me about it. And 3 days after the new rec director started, she was supposed to know all about it, but nobody told her about it. Tracking of the keys to the facility has become unmanageable. There are keys out there that they don't know where they are. And one key is in possession of somebody to the North Belgrade Community Center who will not relinquish it. Keys given to renters don't include access to the mops and brooms in the small closet so that they can clean up after themselves, but they do allow access to the storage area, which doesn't make sense. And a lot of times you find basketballs all over the place. The facility is now used by Goodwill LifeWorks at no cost. They are not a Belgrade nonprofit, and the center sustains damage and requires cleaning as a result of their use. I don't know how that came to be, but I'm totally at a loss. Apparently language in contracts gets changed without BPR knowing about it. Now, BPR drafted the original contracts and have in the past suggested changes for the select board's approval over the last 15 years that I've been involved, but now it doesn't say Belgrade nonprofits. Apparently that word has been removed. I don't know how that happened or when that happened. You may all have decided that that's the way it should be. Cleaning has fallen to the current rec director, and very often takes up to 14 hours a week. That's 35% of the director's time, and she's getting paid not to clean, she's getting paid to run the children's programs, plan for summer the summer camps and whatnot, the events at the Village Green. There was a mouse infestation that required that about $200 worth of food be thrown away because the mice got into it. Vents in the doors in the mechanical room need attention. One has been replaced, the other one was recently falling off the door and children were crawling into the mechanical space. That's a safety issue. There's been some plumbing issues. There's been a leak in one of the toilet water supplies that has had to be fixed 3 times. The last time it was broken, it flooded the gym, it flooded the bathrooms, it flooded the 2 adjacent offices, it got the floors all wet. And he had to, the current rec director had to stop up the mess, and parents of the after school enrichment program kids ended up bringing in heaters and dehumidifiers, which ran for more than a week. A gentleman that works for me told me that his is still there at the center. The urinals require about 10 flushes to actually flush. Hard water may be responsible. There may be some lines that are clogged at this point, but it's ridiculous. I checked this a week ago yesterday, and one of them was yellow with piss. I flushed it, still yellow. Flushed it again and took a picture that second time, and you can still see a hint of yellow. I could not include the movies in this document, but I actually have movies of it flushing. Heating issues abound. There was no little heat in the social room for our last meeting on the 24th. The rec director turned the entire thermostat on the wall, which in my house, they don't move such that the whole thermostat moves, and wiggled it, and the heat did come on, but it was less than like 60 degrees in the social room, and we all wore our coats. Apparently, the owner of Bob the plumber investigated, and at least some repair is in the works. Yesterday, the rec director got there and found that, yes, it had been plowed, but none of the walkways had been shoveled to the doors. I assume that the walkways here were shoveled yesterday morning. Maybe maybe a previous employee used to take care of this type of shoveling in the past. I don't know, but I just want to remind you that Marcia Hay, the former librarian, when the center, I said another name, sorry about that. Former librarian, when Santa had the library inside of it, fell and broke a bone because snow and ice removal was not done properly. The current rec director had a knee operation a few weeks ago, and the doctors told her she's fine for a desk job until the knee heals. But she can't, that person should not be responsible for shoveling the rocks. After her operation, she requested some additional cleaning help and got none. She ended up last week tearing out stitches in her knee. It was too much. So in some of the pictures, you'll see there's a burnt out light in the kitchen. I think for the picture, the childproof insert is out of it, but it's all burnt on the outside. That to me is a little unnerving. And recently, like a week ago yesterday, spray and expanding foam was used immediately to the heating unit under the counter in the kitchen to deter mice. And when we were in there looking at it, the stench from that foam was overwhelming. I had to get out. I got a headache within like 3 minutes. That foam, as far as I know, is not a fireproof foam, and I just don't believe it should be put in immediately adjacent to a heating unit. Granted, the heating unit is not adequate to heat the whole area, but it's still on. Now, if that could be shut off, that may not be a big problem.
Linda, we got about 1 more minute.
There's electricity strung from a sensor mounted under the sink, and the wire runs, the sensor is right next to the new filtration system, and the wire runs up along the sink and up the back wall and is plugged in. That's just, you don't do that. I don't know why it's installed in that location. If it needs to be down low and it needs an outlet, a new outlet has to be put in a little further away, or it needs to be mounted somewhere further away than right along the sink. So you can scroll down and see the foam on the right-hand side, how it just kind of expanded out adjacent to the heater. Continue scrolling down, popped off that big knob, and it's a close-up of the heater. And there's a whole bunch of tiles that have that foam on it now, just because it got dripped everywhere and trapped. You'll see the burnt out outlet. The next set of pictures, you'll see the wires right adjacent to the filter. The sensor is right adjacent to the filter, and you've got an electrical wire threaded up right adjacent to the sink, to the wall.
All right, Linda. So what I'm gathering, and I don't want to cut you off completely, we have a laundry list of maintenance issues at the Center for All Seasons that needs to be addressed.
I suspect there's a lot more.
So, and I think that that's one of the things that we've been talking about. I talked to you about it a little bit, is just that if we're not there all the time, that we don't see the state of disrepair. But we do need to be putting together a laundry list so that we can start ticking the items off the list.
Some of these items need to be dealt with sooner rather than later. There are safety issues involved. We can't just
absolutely.
be waiting when a toilet is flooding, or, well, it wasn't the toilet, it was the feeder line to the toilet, is flooding. The water main should have been shut off, not it allowed to just keep pumping water out into the building while somebody went to Hammond's to get a part. That just doesn't even make sense. If that was my house, I would be shutting off the main. The current rec director has no clue where the water main is. Nobody has given her any of that information so that she knows where switches are to turn things on or off. I don't know where those things are. So I'm no help with that.
Well, and that's one of the things that I think that we're figuring out is that we need a manual to stay with each building. Here's the plans inside, here's where stuff is, and a yearly maintenance list of what needs to happen in the spring, what needs to happen in the summer, what needs to happen in the fall. You know, we have one person who, you know, it's a big job and a lot of facilities. So some stuff I think has fallen off by the wayside. But I do feel like if we start putting this list together, and clearly you've done a great job at getting a lot of this stuff there, documentation, the photos are perfect.
There needs to be somebody that knows more about building maintenance than me. Yeah, I built my own house, but I don't know the ins and outs of all of these heating systems. I don't know the longevity of plumbing in a hard water situation. There's lots of questions that are way above my pay grade and probably way above the pay grade of any of the people that are involved right now.
Well, and I think some of it too, you know, is simply that we had kind of a collision. We had a facilities maintenance person come in that was new, and then we had a town manager come in a month later. And Anthony wouldn't come in assuming that the pieces are in place that we're talking about now. He probably assumed we totally had our stuff together much better than we clearly do sometimes. But I think that the conversations that we're having and pulling this stuff together, that I think the conversation I've had with Anthony about it is that, you know, this is important. We need to have a manual that stays with the building. Doesn't matter who the director is, doesn't matter who the town manager is, who the facilities person is, who sits on this board. Every single building needs to have a manual that stays with the building. And a clear course set up for every year. And when we talked about this a little bit, is that I would like to see the people who are in the buildings 40 hours a week taking stock of the building. We've
lost that person.
Well, and I think that we can get it back. I think that, you know, if we've got to have maybe a meeting where everybody's all in the same room and everybody knows that this is what we've got to do these pieces in order to keep our investment and keep our buildings maintained and staying ahead of the stuff that we need to stay ahead of, just like we would at home. And we're going to have to pick and choose projects just like you do at home. But that we're trying to get some of this started. So, you know, and I've got faith that we'll be able to keep doing it.
So what about the communication with the Board of Parks and Rec about the North Belgrade Community Center becoming the senior center? What about communication regarding the float being replaced. And it coming out of the rec program's budget. What, there's lack of communication elsewise, not just with maintenance and cleaning.
Well, and we didn't even get that memo on the board,
What memo? are you
that there was a
talking about?
float that was being replaced or that it was replaced, because there is a process in place. And if we're getting rid of equipment, what do we do with it? So, and I feel, and we've gotten our processes fallen down a little bit. One of the things we were thinking about earlier is that there used to be a work orders put in. And so if North Belgrade has a mouse infestation, there needs to be a work order generated. And it goes to the facilities maintenance person, it goes to the town manager, it goes to the directors of whatever the programs are, so that everybody knows there's a work order that's been generated and that this is the issue. And then documented. I contacted our pest control person or whatever the steps are. We've got to get back there. And we're just not, and it feels, when everything starts rolling in, it's big. It's bigger than we anticipated. But I think that we can get a handle on it. So Anthony, your suggestions on working with like a list of things for the various facilities, what are your thoughts with that?
Yes, so Chris and I talked about something in this regard today. And so we are implementing the system that you just mentioned, where directors are going to send their facility to the sexton or to the facility maintenance director, CC me, and he and I are going to sit down on a weekly basis and sort of map out his work week, addressing sort of what the priorities are. In fact, we did that today through the rest of this week and next week. I did not have this document in hand, so we'll go back and look at it. We did carve out a couple of days during that, knowing that this was coming to address some of the needs. And so, I'll go through this and work with Chris, and we will blend in the loop, and we'll figure out how we're going to tick through this list. But there are some things that are mentioned in here where, as Paul Harvey would say, we don't yet know the rest of the story. And so
Forgot about Paul Harvey. I love that.
At some point this week, I will send an email to Linda, the board, just sort of detailing sort of what I know and what we know about some of the issues that have been raised.
Yeah, so then we're not reinventing the wheel, because if there's some stuff that has been started and just not completed. And then what do you think?
So projects that really should not be done by an unqualified person, how are they gonna be handled?
So if a
What
plumber,
about
if a
fire
plumber needs to be
hoses?
involved, we have a town plumber. If an electrician needs to be hired, we have a town electrician.
Yeah,
So that's part of working through that on what can you do? What are you qualified to do? And if it's outside of your area of expertise, who do we call in to handle that? And where is it in the budget? Because that drives everything.
Right, there should be enough money in the rec reserve to cover these repairs. It really should be.
well, we have a facility maintenance budget, and Senator All Seasons represents a healthy part of that budget. So I feel like we do probably have enough budgeted for electrical and plumbing.
That's good. So what about the issue with the North Belgrade Community Center being just kind of repurposed without anybody telling the board or the director about it?
So, and we don't want to rehash everything because this little section is just your public comment, but you and I had talked about that. There was no designation of it as, it was not a taking anything away. But
They perceive it as being theirs if they are buying a sofa, a TV, cloth, other stuff for the space. So there's a miscommunication somewhere. Annie gets their minutes. Oh, I'm sorry.
So then I think what we need to do is have a powwow with the Board of Parks and Recreation, the various committees, and get stuff hashed out. We had to throw down,
Well-
probably been 10 years. since
Melanie.
we did this. Yeah,
Oh, it's Mary. So I'm not sure where the communication came about us buying a couch and different things like that. We're not doing that at all. So I'm not sure where that came from, and it's not in the minutes at all about that. And the request to just use the facility for the North Belgrade Community Center would be times that it is not going to be utilized by others that are rentals or anything like that. It is just times that it would be open, and we would use it as a senior center, maybe 3 days a week or something. So, and it was fully supported by Lily, and Lily endorsed that previously, recognizing that the space at the center was not the place for a senior center. So yeah, I'm not sure where those minutes came from. I definitely know that I see the minutes, and those items were not in those minutes. So I just wanted to make that statement.
No, I appreciate it. And I think kind of what I tried to explain, Mary, was that we did hijack the process because we really that request should have gone to the Board of Parks and Recreation, who then brought that to the Select Board. So we did hijack that. I did explain that it was more a matter of needing to have a landing pad to apply for grants, and that the Select Board had okayed that, but it was in no anticipation of taking the North Belgrade Community Center away from the Board of Parks and Recreation, that we would be using it in addition to, not in lieu of.
Right. No, because we didn't want to take away at all. And we made that very clear in the beginning that, that we felt that it was important to have, senior events going on in both locations to offer to both areas of Belgrade. So anyway, okay. All right. Thank you, Melanie.
No, I appreciate that clarification, because it's hard if we haven't seen minutes and I haven't seen.
So the minutes are posted though on the town website, and that is not in the minutes at all. So anyone can go there. You can look at our agendas, you can look at our minutes, and there is nothing there about couches or anything like that. We don't even, we're not even talking about those kinds of things. The only thing that we did talk about was getting a closet or a little stand-up closet kind of thing that we could put craft items in, and cards and puzzles, those kinds of things. So.
All right.
I think we need to move on with this, and this should be a whole meeting by itself.
That's where I was just going with Ricky, is that.
Anyways, we spent a half an hour on this already. We've got a long agenda for tonight, so
Yeah, exactly.
we've set it out now so people understand a little bit, something to work with.
Yeah, and I think that Anthony and the Board of Parks and Rec, and that we can get a handle on some of the issues moving forward, so.
I want to thank you for the half hour. And I'm looking forward to making forward progress and getting this place back up and running like it was pre-COVID.
Well, and the older I get, the more I want the senior programming, so. If somebody wants to deliver a sand bucket to Melanie's house, you just let me know. I can only fill them halfway to get them into the car, so. All right, thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so next up on the agenda is old business. First item is the approval of the January 18, 2022 Select Board meeting minutes. We'll
So be
take-
it.
Moved and seconded. Those are open for discussion.
Do we have a new explanation of the warrants? Because for the January 18 minutes, there were a number of those warrant articles.
So,
The votes were mixed up because of misnumbering.
yes, so this is correct. So the votes that you see here do correspond with the articles, but when we were going through there, we had one of the articles numbered twice. And so when I did the minutes, I just made sure that the that the votes corresponded with the article, if not the article number. If that makes sense.
And was article number 42 added, because that wasn't even on.
Thank you.
Night, Linda, thank you.
Article 42.
Article 42, there were 42 articles, and the list only went to 41. Votes only went to 41.
Did we have 42? Because we had one number twice.
Let me go look on Mary's desk. There are 41 articles.
Oh, there were 41.
So I think, didn't we have like a double 14 or something?
We had one of them that was numbered, two articles with the same number.
Right. All right, is there any more discussion?
So all the questions that I raised were just because of these numbers.
Yes.
All right, seeing none. Barbara,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Rick,
Whoops, yes.
all right, 5 yeses, those are approved. All right, next up, we have the consideration of the final approval of the proposed ordinance changes. First up, we have the subdivision ordinance replacement. I will take a motion to open that item.
Second.
Moved and seconded. That item is open for discussion.
Did the 2-acre lots go into that deal?
I'm sorry, are we talking about the subdivision ordinance right now, Rick?
Yes.
And the two, so are you asking if there's a 2-acre minimum lot size?
Yes.
Rich, I don't believe that's in there, is it?
No.
Yeah.
Asking Peter.
Oh,
No,
asking Peter Rushton. Peter, can you hear
yeah,
us?
he's online here.
Yep, I can hear you. I'm not aware that that's in there, Rick.
All right, I just saw that email flying around and that's why I went. Okay, thank you.
So the, our town attorney did a legal review of all of these ordinances, but he said there were no substantive changes in there. So the things that he did recommend, we talked with the planning board about, and they approved each one, and those are in the notes alongside throughout the document. Barbara and Carol have also offered some grammatical corrections.
I noticed a couple of you ladies probably already got them.
Yeah, and so, and really and truly, I think the only thing that is, and it's not a substantive difference, but Carol suggested that there were several places in the document that it said that fees were to be payable by check. And we wondered, well, why is that? Why couldn't you pay cash or credit? And then who knows what we'll be paying with at some future point. And so I ran that by the planning board, and the consensus was, yeah, it was good to just remove by check and just payable to the town.
Okay. So if they want to pay us in Bitcoin, they'll figure out how do we process
And maybe-
Bitcoin?
Maybe at some future.
We have to
point.
put an
Well,
ATM in that does some conversion.
In 5 years, there may be a new way to pay.
Yeah. I have 12 eggs and I have. So did we want to tick down through any of those, or were those ones that can be handled outside of this meeting? Or were grammatical and then we're just
Oh,
gonna change
we're talking
that?
about things like commas and making sure that we were consistent in how we treated the phrase rights of way.
Right.
Making sure anytime we mention a number that we spelled out the number, say 3, that we had in parentheses, the numeral 3, just things like that.
All right, on page 5, the word Ben. is
Yes,
what-
we did correct that.
Ben.
Got that.
Figured somebody had, but. All right. And. All right, Rick, anything from you? All right, anything from Richard, Peter?
Pardon me?
And
I'm sorry,
Any-
I just wanted to mention, I want to thank the select persons for reviewing this ordinance. It took a lot of work to get to this point, so I really appreciate the interest and feedback. So thank you.
We appreciate all the work that you and your committee put into it.
I was just gonna say
You
that.
did, you
Take
did
that-
much more work than we did, just reading the final draft.
Yes.
Anthony was also a big help to the planning board.
Oh, stop it, Rich.
All right, well, thank you to everyone involved, because this was huge and it needed to be done. And we needed that little extra time to do it, but I'm glad we did it, because the final product, hopefully we won't need to redo while any of us are still around.
Yeah, I think it does speak very well of the planning board's work that our attorney went through this and found, you know, as he said, no substantive changes. So they really did their due diligence.
Good job.
All right, that being said, I will take a motion to approve the subdivision ordinance replacement.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none. Ricky,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Barbara.
Yes.
All right, 5 yeses. Ta-da!
Thank you.
Move it forward. Oh, no.
I was sitting here thinking, the last time I was before the select board, I was getting accused of illegally planting trees.
Well, and I was really glad to see you show back up after all that.
Yeah.
So if you want to start us a tree committee, you let me know. Thank you, Rich.
Yeah.
Have a good night. Give Marshall a hug.
All right, thanks.
Bye. All right, next up, we have the Board of Appeals ordinance amendments. I'll take a motion to open that.
So second.
Moved and seconded. Perfect, that's open for discussion.
Well, and we do have our appeals board chair here, Mr. Hano. And again, no substantive changes, although when Barbara went through, she did note two things in section 7, paragraph E. And I thought this was a good suggestion. She suggested gender neutral pronouns. So we use things like grandfather, father, husband, son, and just make that grandparent, spouse. So I thought that was a good suggestion. And then she inquired in section 6, paragraph B, why that was left blank. And so that was removed altogether. And so we just left it blank at the suggestion of the attorney. But if we wanted to renumber the paragraphs in section 6, that could very easily be done.
May as well. Otherwise, it'll look like we missed something.
Okay.
We'll be like, oh, look, they went from A to C. I wonder what was in B. And then we'll be trying to figure that out. All right, anything else?
I do have a piece I wanted to bring up is, especially on this, because we're talking about conflict of interest. We talk about family, but we do not talk about domestic partner. So you can have a situation where you have a domestic partner. I think we just need to add the word domestic partner. And if we don't, you could have someone who's a domestic partner and they wouldn't be excluded on a conflict of interest because our ordinance doesn't exclude them. So we should say, shall include any member of their immediate family and do grandparents, wife, domestic partner,
Spouse or domestic partner.
spouse or domestic partner. And there are 3 or 4 places in here where they talk about domestic partner. So I think we just need to add that. And then in doing that, when this sort of tallies into the cemetery ordinance, in the cemetery ordinance, I'm thankful that they included domestic partners that was being rewritten. But the definition of the domestic partner in the cemetery ordinance, I wanted to suggest that we strike part of the last part of that domestic partner piece. And the only reason they come together is we're talking about the same subject. But in the cemetery ordinance, when they talk about domestic partner, what page it's on? Someplace here.
It's next up, so it's your next section.
Oh, okay.
Should be.
Here we go. Yeah.
Cemetery.
So it's on the second page, number 14, it says a registered domestic partner, and they define it, shall be one of two unmarried adults who are domiciled together under long-term arrangements that evidence a commitment to remain responsible indefinitely for each other's welfare. And then I would suggest we remove "and who are registered with the state of Maine." Because I came up quickly with 5 couples I'm aware of off the top of my head who qualify under domestic partner, but I would almost guarantee they are not registered with the state. So that it's not a requirement they be registered with the state, but under this ordinance, it would require it. So I would just say that are responsible indefinitely for each other's welfare, period. And we use that same definition in the Board of Appeals, so we're consistent.
So I guess I'll play devil's advocate. If they're not registered with the state, then how do we have any legal proof that they are domestic partners? I could just have a long-term roommate. And then
Well,
one
you
could
can-
possibly affect
I mean,
the
you can
other.
buy a house together, you can have kids together. It's not required to be a domestic partner on your insurance policy that you're registered with the state. You can have a mortgage together. You can have kids together, which would be evidence to me, but I would be very surprised if most of those folks are registered with the state. And that's my concern, is that it really is my concern, because if they're not registered with the state, we're not going to have a conflict of interest under the Board of Appeals definition.
Phil?
How are you gonna regulate that? I mean, they have some rule or something to say that it's a domestic partner. You just can't come in here and say, I want my partner to be in charge. If I should die. How are you gonna assume that that's he or she is a partner?
And that they
It's
really
not
are invested in your
registered,
welfare.
Whatever.
I mean, you can have legal agreements that you've set up, but not registered with the state. That's all. I'm concerned, and I'm really concerned about the conflict of interest piece of it. That if they do everything, they own a house together, they have kids together, haven't registered with the state, then there's no conflict of interest when we get into the Board of Appeals.
Bruce?
All we did is we followed the state guidelines on domestic partner. I think the town needs to stay with the state guidelines. And anything in the state that you go and read about domestic partners, it says it has to be registered with the state.
Because I think, yeah, it said maybe registered. Maybe it doesn't
Maybe.
have to be, so then,
Because somebody could, for instance, say, I was a domestic partner with so-and-so, and I want a cemetery. I'm just using the cemetery right now, so that's the fact that I'm involved in. And I want a cemetery law. If you, okay, well, what now what? Now we're gonna have to do a cemetery law. They may not have been a domestic partner, but we don't know that because we have no way to prove it, you know what I'm saying? It's a very gray area. And it's a very thin tightrope to walk. And this is why we kind of threw it at the attorney, with this part of it ourselves, we threw it at the attorney, say, you kind of clarify what, look at, what, how to word this and what way to word it.
right.
Jay has his hand up when you get a minute.
Does,
Jay
oh,
Bradshaw.
sorry, Jay?
I'm sorry, that was a mistake. I was I didn't intend to raise my,
You were just waving. Hi,
Yeah,
Jay.
just waving to us.
just wanted to say hi. Thank you.
So you don't want to weigh in on domestic partnership?
I'm all set. My wife is married and we have the same rings.
Hmm,
So Melanie, in 2003, the legislature, I have a copy of the bill, enacted, says the legislature signed into law April 28, 2004, establishes the concept of domestic partners in Maine law. Under the law, registered domestic partners are accorded legal status similar to that of a married person with respect of matters of probate, guardianships, conservatorships, inheritance, protection from abuse, and related matters. The legislation established a domestic department registry housed at the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Vital Records Office. So that gives them some teeth when they're trying to do adoptions or what have you like that, and inheritance. But it says you may register. I think it would be up to them if they want to register or not, but Bruce brings up a good point. If they come here and they want to buy a lot, and somebody says, well, I'm a domestic partner, then how do we approve
right.
it? It's a gray area. And then I have some other material on the domestic partner registry as well. If you want to table this a little bit. And look this
Oh,
stuff
bring
over.
it. Just bring it.
You want
Yeah, would
a
it,
copy of it?
yeah, it's probably not a bad idea. Is the copier up and
Oh,
running,
yes, of
Anthony?
course. Oh, I'm inclined to leave it in.
You gotta be registered.
Just because if you're not registered, you legally can't do anything else with that, for that partner anyway.
Right. Because I was wondering if we had like a power of attorney or.
Well,
had
if you have your own
something like
power
that.
of attorneys, you can do that. But I mean, you can have a house together. You don't need to be registered to do that. Your insurance companies do not require you to be registered to be on the same policy. So I mean, you can leave it in. My concern is not the cemetery. My concern is the Board of Appeals. Because if you have two folks that are living together that bought a house together, clearly domestic partner, and they get into a conflict before the Board of Appeal, that conflict of interest is not going to hold. You can't exclude one of them because they're not a spouse and they're not a family member. So that's where I see the problem, is keeping integrity in that conflict of interest portion of the Board of Appeals. It's not the cemetery piece that is there. So the Board of Appeals, the piece where I saw it.
So where is it in the Board of Appeals other than,
It says,
because on page 5, the conflict of interest where it mentions the relations has to do with members having a conflict, members of a committee.
right, it
Of the
says
board
shown
having
the
a conflict.
pecuniary benefit to any member of the person's immediate family. And then they define immediate family or to his employer. So it's on page 5, paragraph E. Situations where a member may have a current relationship with the applicant, blah, blah, blah. So that's where we're not listing it, so you could have that situation where they wouldn't be excluded. And it comes up again in someplace here.
oh, under section paragraph B, perhaps?
Yes,
Yeah,
appointments. Select board, no select person nor his, her spouse or playing blah, 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 blah. So spouse or domestic partner could be a member or an alternate of the board. If you don't define that, then the domestic partner could be.
Right.
So that's,
So the question is, should it be domestic partner or registered domestic partner in order to be consistent between the two ordinances?
well, that's why I'm
Right.
saying if you do
That's
it
what you're
here,
saying.
that's why you should change it in the cemetery one. That's all I'm trying to get to, is to make sure that we keep the conflict of interest, the integrity of the conflict of interest in the Board of Appeals, and therefore you should be consistent elsewhere within town documents. So,
Because if this says registered domestic partner, then there could be an unregistered. domestic
That's
partner who would
exactly
be
correct.
excluded.
who would be included or
Included,
could,
yeah.
that's the point I'm trying to bring forward.
What are your thoughts, Barbara?
Hmm?
Can see your eyebrows going.
That's where I was going with it.
Yeah, I think it's a gray area.
So which section did you want to include that wording, Carol, did you say?
Well, on the Board of Appeals,
Yes.
on the Board of Appeals on page 1, number 2, it's appointments, number B, and it says neither a select person nor his, her spouse, and I would put or domestic partner.
Okay.
And then it pops up again.
But it's also in the rest of that sentence, nor a planning board or board of appeals member or his, her spouse. So it would be twice. in that
Spouse,
sentence.
that's right,
Or
or
domestic
domestic partner, right. And then again, I mean, it should be in there. It's a question of how you want to define it. Then again, I think it's on page 5, section E, where we want to go to the gender neutral description of
Immediate family.
immediate family, should be immediate family that or domestic partner or his, her employer.
So you would see domestic partner as being outside the parentheses of immediate family.
Yes,
That's an E.
that's in E. Mhm. On page 5, number E. And then I don't think it came up again.
You got that?
So those are the two places that I found it in the Board of Appeals ordinance.
So, okay.
May I say something?
Yes.
It's Norma,
And Norma,
I think. Hi. There are two different things here. One is to serve on the board, and the other one is to be on the board and hear an appeal. So I could see serving on the board, but it seems like the language in E covers somebody who would be a domestic partner by a person having to disclose his relationship prior to the hearing, that he has a potential conflict of interest, which every board member is obligated to do. And then the board decides whether that person is too close to hear the issue. And situations where a member may have a current or prior relationship with the appellant or his or her family, seems like it covers a domestic partner situation without having to stipulate that.
Yeah,
That's a
I
good
see,
catch.
that's a good point.
yeah, that is a good point,
Yeah,
Norma.
good point.
Go, Norma.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can take it out of E on page 5.
Take it out of
Take it out
E.
of E.
Okay, and what about the first one?
I think we can leave it in the first one. I would be okay with spouse or domestic partner being added in there.
Yep.
Everyone's okay with that? And we'll just keep it at the legal definition at this point because we don't really have any other way of proving it otherwise.
Okay, so we don't need to deal with the registered domestic partner in this.
I think
Okay, so I'm
Yes.
only playing devil's advocate. You have two folks, they live together, they own a house together. They have not registered. They can serve on a board together. I'm just, we're building an ordinance that hopefully is going to be good for the next 20 or 30 years, so.
Well, the way it stands for requirements for the select board, the same thing could happen. But if you and I were married,
You can't.
We're
if you're
done.
married, correct?
if you're married, you cannot.
Sir, so it would seem as though maybe we need to go back through the whole board pieces and make sure we're consistent in our wording. But if we're getting an ordinance approved, it would seem to me as if we should approve it looking forward, not having to come back and redo them all. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
Right,
No,
okay,
I agree.
okay, so on 1B, or domestic partner,
You mean to be
well, I'm sorry, page 1.
Page one.
Roman numeral 2,
Two,
letter B,
B.
capital B,
right.
or
So,
domestic partner.
or domestic partner. And then the question is, how do we define domestic partner? So there are two issues there. And maybe we don't need to address that tonight, but it's something that I think we need to be aware of.
No, I would say that you would want to use the definition that the attorney provided. For.
But do you want them to be registered?
That is your call, but I would say I would include the definition simply because
Right,
it does put some sort of parameters around. what that-
I agree. I think you need a definition, and it's a question of whether we're going to require that they be registered.
Right, I
if
think
we-
that's the only thing to be decided.
If you require that they be registered, two folks that live in the same house could be on the board together. If they're not registered, that's the piece I'm trying to close that loophole.
Oh, I gotcha.
So,
So if we just say or domestic partner without dealing with the register, without saying registered.
right,
Then
but
that
then somewhere
eliminates
we
both.
need to define, put in a definition.
I
for
mean, in the
domestic partner.
cemetery ordinance, there's a whole list of definitions. Here we have to.
Right.
have it.
Right.
So we just take the definition off of page 2 to number 14.
And then it's a question, do you require they be registered with the state? That's the piece that I'm trying to close that loophole.
Right, but I think whether or not you include that in the definition is a significant change to the definition. So,
Yeah,
Right.
it does change the definition.
yes,
So
you're
if you,
narrowing the definition if you require a
if
registration.
you require them to be registered, then you can have a loophole that sits out there.
That's
Because
right.
people who aren't registered could be on the board together.
That's right.
That's what I'm trying to sew up, so that that couldn't happen. And it's,
You can ask Phil about that
Well, the
So-
problem is we gotta get this thing passed tonight.
Right,
Right.
but does it really though? Because when I read the definition, it says one of two unmarried adults who are domiciled together under long-term arrangements that evidence a commitment to remain responsible indefinitely for each other's welfare. So,
but read the cemetery definition.
Well,
That-
that is the
cemetery.
cemetery
But doesn't it
definition.
also say,
So, and then it says
and
domestic
who are
partners.
registered with the state of Maine?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm sorry, I went back to this definition. This is the one I highlighted on my thing, like this is the one we should
Oh.
use. But apparently I wasn't clear.
Oh, okay.
Because we haven't
Yeah,
gotten over
so,
that
and
part.
that's from the attorney that says they may register as opposed to having to register.
That's
Right.
correct.
Right,
So it's just changing that who may register.
right.
Then we don't have a loophole. And it looks like the attorney addressed it there by saying may and not have to.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna throw one thing. If you look at the paperwork I gave you, if they are not registered through the HHS, then that does not provide them with guardianship.
But that's their
That's
their
their-
own problem.
Correct.
That doesn't affect the town.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah. No, I agree. We're not saying that they have all those rights.
Right.
But I'm just trying to close the loophole as far as conflict of interest.
Right.
So if you then just add domestic partners may register, and if they do that, they then get the extra benefits
Right,
of whatever that law says they get.
right.
All right, is everybody okay with that?
Okay,
Okay,
I'm still kind of confused on the may, because the may is saying if they're not registered, you still get the same thing is, if, say, for instance, one of the partners passes, or a potential partner, say for instance, that, there's only a partner for two weeks and the partner passes.
well, that's not what this says. They've domiciled together under a long-term arrangements that evidence a commitment to remain responsible indefinitely. That's the
One of them
definition the
has
lawyer
passed.
gave us.
Right, but one of them has passed. how are you gonna be able to prove that that other partner had a long-term relationship? They can say they did, but if they're not registered or anything like that, how are you gonna prove that? This is where I'm getting at. I still think we should stay with the state law that was passed by the state in 2003 and enacted into law in 2004. That's just my opinion. I think we should stick with state law. And change, and then if the state law changes and further down,
Well, this says, but what the attorney says here is may register, not that they have to register. That's what his note says on this.
And I disagree with the may. I'm just one person.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason it says are in the definition, because that was the recommendation from the cemetery. That it be a requirement, as opposed to an option.
Right. But the attorney's saying it's okay for it to be an option,
Right.
is what, that's how I read this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, so as far as us, the Board of Appeals ordinance, we're gonna change, we're gonna add the appointments, B, we're gonna add
domestic partner,
partners. correct,
Twice.
Anthony?
Yep, two
Twice.
times in that one.
right.
Thank you, Barbara.
And then on
And
page 5,
So
I think we decided on 5, we didn't need to, right?
5 is fine, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
page 5 is
That's
fine.
what I'm pointed out, yeah,
Yeah, which is
because
good
of the
catch,
appellant,
because of the appellant, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And on page 4, we talked about under meetings, number 6, the B, this is all crossed out. You want to renumber that?
Yes,
Okay. The
Please.
reason that we crossed it out, I think we consulted with MMA on that, right, Anthony?
Yes.
But that's fine, we can go either way.
I just think, I agree with Melanie that it might raise questions
Yeah,
in the
but if
future
we
as to
forget-
why it goes from A to C with something missing.
Okay.
they're gonna be like, those people were whacked. We didn't even know the
No,
alphabet.
usually what happens is when you change something like that, you actually print in there, like blank intentional.
Right,
My
Okay.
manuals are all like that.
yes, and we wondered about that too.
Okay, so
right.
just not to belabor the issue, this talks about registered domestic partner on. If we're going to require they be registered, you don't need to change it. If we're not going to require they be registered, there are a couple of places here in your ordinance that says registered domestic partner
Is that the cemetery ordinance or the
In the
appeals?
cemetery.
in the cemetery.
okay.
ordinance.
We're doing the appeals one right now.
Oh, we're
and then
doing
we'll
Board
get
of
to the
Appeals. I'm
cemetery.
sorry. I'm sorry.
So the Board of Appeals is going to use domestic partner, but without the registration.
Right,
All right, is there anything else on the Board of Appeals?
no, I think it's perfect.
I
I move,
Right,
I move
Thank
that we adopt the
Woo.
ordinance.
all right, so I make a motion that we approve the amendments to the Board of Appeals ordinance.
Second,
All right. So any more discussion? There's the mama eyebrows on that one. Seeing none. Ricky,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Barbara,
yes.
Dan.
Yes.
All right, 5 yeses.
Just wait, now we're coming up to the cemetery.
All right, I'll take a motion to open the item for the cemetery ordinance replacement.
So be it.
Moved and seconded. That is open for discussion. So I would like some clarification on the law for domestic partnerships, please.
The
I'm
one
gonna
that looks
Google-
this one,
I'm gonna Google this one. What was
No,
that?
if you have, you don't have time right now, but you can look down through those pages I gave you. Anthony, new copies for you.
Yes,
This, in all the research that I did when we were doing the cemetery ordinance, Bill and our committee, I researched Oakland, Manchester, Winthrop was in the process of rewriting there, so we kind of really rewrote this thing from what we had. And anywhere in here, in their ordinances, it doesn't mention domestic partner. However, it was brought up that we should include that in our definitions, number one. Right, Carol?
Right.
Okay, so we did. on page 2, number 14. At the request, we talked to the attorney and we took quite a discussion with this. So that would be the first change, I guess, and I don't know if we're, and put the word registered or just use the domestic partner.
To me on this one, because of what we're doing with the cemetery, I would prefer to have it.
How much of an imposition is it to be registered? I mean, if you have to fill out a form, you have
Yes,
to pay.
like in those guidelines I gave you, it tells you that you have to be domiciled for a year.
Right,
And then you have to go to DHHS, fill out some paperwork.
I think it's the fact of people not bothering to or thinking about it.
Right.
but if
So-
it's a requirement, then they can think about it. I don't know. I mean,
But
is
it's
it,
not a requirement. Here they're saying they may register, and my only concern, oh, this is cemetery, so
Right.
we're back
we're
to
on
cemetery.
cemetery.
But aren't we going to use the same definition within the town? Or are we going to have a different definition for the cemetery?
I think we need a different definition of cemetery, because there's nothing to do with appeals or anything else. You're actually.
Have to do with conflict of interest.
Site.
But if you have one definition for cemetery and a different definition for your other board.
But what's really the concern? Is the concern that people are gonna take advantage, that people who have only been together for 6 months are gonna wanna be buried together and what's the
How do
issue?
we know? That's what I'm.
I mean, if they wanna be buried together, shouldn't that be their choice?
But let me throw example out here, and I'm not, okay, so for instance, say, I come in, Bill's passed away, I come in and say, I was a domestic partner with Bill. But I wasn't, but I could say that, if you're not registered, you guys have, and I'm not a town resident, you guys are required to give me by this ordinance, you guys are required to give me a lot.
And not only that, you could take over the rest of his lots if he had multiple lots.
Right.
So this is when you're purchasing a lot. You
Yeah,
come to the town,
yeah,
you know, as a resident. First, you have to be a resident.
right.
So when you come to the lot, come in, you want to buy a lot. And that's,
It may never, ever come up,
May
but
never
some
come up.
people are pretty smart and, you know, they'll pick up these ordinances and read them in the online. And if they want to be buried in an area or
Or it's cheaper.
where it's cheaper, that's the way in.
Well,
It's.
I mean, how would they prove that they had a long-term relationship? I mean, they could come and say, we've been together, but you didn't own a house together, you didn't live together. I mean,
that's where the registration.
Right.
So-
That's why I think the
Yeah.
registration needs to be on this.
it's what
I'm
I
kind
just
of,
raised the question. So,
yeah,
But I do sort of agree with, we ought to use the same terminology, but this is a little bit more technical as far as we're concerned.
right. So that's the question. Are we gonna have one? So if we say registered, then you now have a loophole in your Board of Appeal if you're gonna use the same definition. That's the point I'm trying to raise.
So
I guess-
we're looking at
I mean, again, it
other
doesn't
ones.
seem like it's too likely that domestic partners registered or not would both want to, will have applied to be on the planning board. I mean, wouldn't the chair of the planning board say, hey, you guys live together? That's not
Well,
cool.
unless someone says, well, we
we
doesn't say
we don't
we
really
can't.
like each other.
I think
That's
we're
all. I just-
comparing apples and oranges,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the planning board to be appointed, they gotta come before the select board anyway. So select board makes a determination who gets put on the planning board. If we determine that
it's too cozy.
too cozy, we don't have to put them on there.
Uh-huh.
You know, where it comes to cemetery plots, it's just a resident can come in and put money down for perpetual care and be assigned a lot. And if somebody who isn't legally allowed to make decisions for that person, because you gotta be registered to legally make the decisions, you know, they could come in, you know, if you had 6 plots, you know, you could bury that person in that one plot and the other person can come in and go, all right, now the rest of my family's coming in and use the other ones. So I think we're comparing apples and oranges to two different things. I'd rather see it a little stricter when it comes to, who's in control of the perpetual care lots.
And who's gonna be there forever.
Mm.
I'm inclined,
And it doesn't
I'm in
s-
agreement on that one.
It doesn't seem
having
like
to
it's a
be
big deal. I mean,
registered.
if someone comes to the town office and says, we want to buy lots together, and then they would just be told, we have to go to Augusta and get registered, and that's one more step.
Yeah, either get
Right.
registered or get married, one or the other.
Right,
You can-
right, but here's the two choices, and
Since
this is
that's
what we
married
have to
now,
have.
Shotguns
We gotta have it.
Could we, Melanie, could we approve it with registered as far as the cemetery committee goes? And then in our ordinance, we have said we're gonna review it every 2 years. Maybe we could look into this matter further and then make an amendment later
Could.
on.
Absolutely.
Is that satisfied?
Sure.
I saw Anthony's eyebrows. He has no poker face either.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about it either way.
All right. I'm okay. I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the cemetery ordinance replacement and have the language in there with registered domestic partnership or partners. Just
I'll second it.
any further discussion? Seeing none. Dan,
Yes.
Ricky,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Barbara.
Yes.
All right, 5 yeses.
Thank you
We
very much.
relieve you of your duty of that
Yes.
this evening.
Thank you for all your work.
But in
on it.
another 2 years, I'm putting it in my Google Calendar.
Well, and I don't know if we have to wait that long, but I mean, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
I really want to thank Anthony for all his help and the rest of the board. We all worked numerous hours on this, and thank you for looking at it. I know it takes a lot of your time to read all this stuff, but we appreciate it, and it was something that we really felt it had to be done. So,
And I think having these discussions about domestic partners and, new gender neutral ways of referring to family members. I mean, it's just, sort of raising our consciousness about how things are in the world in which we live. And we have to adapt to changing times,
Absolutely.
and changing attitudes.
right.
So,
Madam Chair,
yes, sir.
that was one of the things that the cemetery committee was, quite concerned with, and in researching this, Mike did a lot of research on it, and we determined the best way to follow with the definition for domestic partnership was to follow the state law, and we took our language exactly from the law that the state of Maine has passed.
We appreciate it. All right. If we've beat that one right to death. Let's move on to new business. Yes, we all need a plot. All right, so first up under new business, we have the consideration of a bid for the used fire equipment. I'll take a motion, open that item. Moved and
Second.
seconded. That item's open for discussion. So nobody wanted all that sweet stuff?
Just the air bottles. And so, I got one bid for that. That was from Rome for $1,200. And so what Chief McKenzie has proposed is that we just seek your authorization to advertise the other stuff available for free. No one picks it up, and you just.
What I'd recommend is actually having Dan, Chief McKenzie, get a hold of the Maine Fire Chiefs Association.
Okay.
And ask them if they know of any town that needs it, because I know there's some towns down east that are wearing turnout gear from the 80s. I just heard about it, heard that in Public Safety Committee the other day. They were talking about some of these towns that they try to follow NFPA, but some of them only are using 20 and 30-year-old equipment because they just can't afford it.
Yeah.
So they may have somebody that will take it off our hands.
Okay, good idea.
And then if that doesn't go, I would say if we advertise it for free, just be clear that there's no warranty, there's no nothing.
Right.
You don't take it back to Beans and get a refund. Nothing like
We're not
that.
gonna get a refund on that stuff.
Just teasing.
But, I mean, some of it is still good equipment, and I bet there are some towns that. They really could use it.
All right. So other than that, we
I make a motion
bid,
to accept Bones
fire
offer
department's
on the bottles.
bid for $1,200 for the 8 self-contained breathing apparatus air bottles.
And second,
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none. Barbara?
Yes,
Carol?
yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Rick?
Yep.
All right, 5 yeses. All right, next up, we have the consideration of placing a foreclosed property for sale by sealed bid. Take a motion to open that item. Moved and seconded. That item is open for discussion.
So Melanie, Dan raised a good question. Since we have Mary available, I think that's a good question maybe to pose to Mary, maybe with her institutional knowledge, she knows how we handled this in the past, Dan.
Which question? Oh, the tax
Yes.
amount.
So Mary, Dan's got a question.
Yes.
Hey, what are we looking to get out of this? Because Anthony was saying 1 year's taxes, but don't we want to try to have a minimum to get all 3 years taxes on this?
I think in the past that we have tried to get all of the taxes, back taxes that were paid, and then over and above. So yes, all 3 years taxes that, and then hopefully a little bit more. I would think that it would be valuable to somebody down there that already owns property in the area. And maybe it's.
Well, that's another question I had, and I don't know if Peter is still here and all, if he's left.
Peter, are you still around?
He's gone.
Nope.
Yeah.
Shoot.
Yeah, because I was wondering about that, because when these lots were all subdivided off, I was looking at the tax map. And you've got a bunch of them that own these little half-acre lots, or just under a half acre. So that means none of them are buildable? Or is it
No, but
because?
they're across the street. A lot of them are across the street from the properties, and I only know that because I know somebody that lived down there and they own their property, but then across the drive or the street, whatever, they owned another small piece. So
Yeah, well, the lot on, I looked at the tax map, and even the lot on the water side, isn't it much bigger than the lot on the backside? So at some point, these were buildable lots, is what I'm getting at.
That's correct. So before the minimum lot size ordinance came into effect, if someone built on it, then they're grandfathered. But if they haven't built on it, and now that the ordinance is in effect, then you can't build.
So, see, that doesn't seem right to me. If you've got a lot that was legal when you bought it, they should be grandfathered to be able to build on them.
Yeah, I guess in this case, it's interesting that we don't know who the owner is.
Right.
yeah.
But-
How
but-
can we not,
but-
how can we not
but-
know who
but-
the owner is?
You know, what brings that up with me is I've got a lot next to my house right now that I gave to one of my kids. It's 1.4 something acres. And we're starting to have discussions about changing the ordinance to a buildable lot size of 2 acres. Now, that means down the road, they couldn't build on that lot. So it's absolutely useless to them at that point. So town should buy it off them.
Well, only, true, but only if the select board puts that ordinance change to the voters and the voters.
Right,
approve it. So-
but that's what I'm saying. is
And I
if these
just,
lots- every time these things go into effect, you're virtually taking somebody's property.
yeah,
So that's why I was wondering if this lot, when it was subdivided, was a buildable lot, if it comes under the grandfathered, so that it's still a buildable lot. It's not being subdivided newly. So yes, I mean, somebody who had a new piece of property, wanted to subdivide it, they couldn't subdivide a quarter acre or a half acre off and build on it.
right.
But if you own an existing lot, there's something wrong when you start changing ordinances.
And that was subdivided and approved by the planning board at the time, so that, in my eyes, I think we took that to the state and went to court on that. I think that is a buildable law. all the lots.
The other option for the owner, like in this case, Dan, if they were to form a condo association with those 3 lots, with the one in the middle that's owner unknown, and then the 2 lots. on
Yeah,
the
you
side.
could buy all 3 and put them together.
Well, no, I mean, if they had individual owners and they went together and formed a condo association, then they could build one.
I think you'd have to go back to the law, to find out when the subdivision, when it was subdivided.
Right.
See what the ordinance was then, and if that was a buildable ordinance at that point, you can't, that's already subdivided, that's already.
Yeah, you're taking somebody's piece of land.
Right, that's
Yeah.
already documented in town registered in the registry of deeds as a buildable lot.
I
mean,
gotta,
think that would be a
I've got
question
a
for the
sneak,
attorney.
I was gonna say, that's not,
Well,
but that's
why
not
I
what we're
was
looking
wondering
at
if Peter
here.
was here, because I think it would be a question for them, is if that's a lot that would have to be granted a variance.
well, and
Because-
I've got a sneaking suspicion that when we contacted the abutters and nobody claimed ownership of that property, that there wasn't anybody there that was like, "Ah, if I get that piece, now I can build something.
But
I think
but
they're-
again, I looked at it, and if there's another lot right next to it that's nothing built on it. But even if that person bought that lot, it's still not big enough by the new word, by
By the new one.
40,000 square foot to build on, because that still would be, because each one of those was only 17,860 something square feet or something like that.
Now, could you build a little garage?
But you can
or
keep
something
someone from
there?
putting a trailer on it for the summer, camper on it.
30,000 square foot.
Right,
It says campsites is 30,000 square foot.
because I just said, someone, can you put a camper on?
You could put-
So
You had 2 of them.
that's the question. I
Right.
just, it struck me as looking at that going, it limits who can actually buy this thing, what they can use it for. So you're almost better off just calling up the neighbor and saying, pay us $900 and you can have it.
Well, as part of the process, the abutters are notified
Yeah.
that it is for sale.
Yeah,
So,
all right.
I think they have to pay the back taxes and all the legal fees.
That's correct, Rick.
Right.
So prior to 2019, was anybody paying taxes on this piece of property?
That I do not know.
Because it seems like 2019 is where the taxes started being in arrears, kind of came to our
does
attention
Mary know that?
last year, the year before.
Well, I think 2019 was when the town put into motion the process to have it declared owner unknown.
Right.
Foreclosure, right.
Yeah, and so once it was assessed as owner unknown, then the clock started ticking toward foreclosure.
But what happened in 2018?
Right.
Did we get taxes on it? Was somebody paying the bill on it?
Yeah,
Well, we
and I
can
just,
go back and look at that. We can.
I'm just curious because it just seems
I believe
weird
we did.
to have something that's owner unknown.
Yeah, because it seems like we looked at that last year and there was not, but I don't think we dug deeper than that.
I would actually, Dan, guess that there wasn't taxes collected in 2018 and maybe prior to that. And so in order to foreclose on it, you had to have it assessed as owner unknown. And so once that was done, then the clock starts ticking for foreclosure. That's just a guess.
And that's fine. I mean, we can put it out for sealed bid. That's fine. It's just, I'm just curious on
Is that
that.
your motion?
So I have one question for the board about this, because in the policy, it says that the prior or the current owner or prior owner, once we put it out to bid, has a last chance opportunity to pay the taxes. But in doing so, they also have to pay the cost of the newspaper advertisements that go along with that. There's no owner in this case, so those newspaper ads are quite expensive, and under the policy, we run those for 3 days. And so I'm wondering if we should include the cost of the newspaper ad along with the taxes, back taxes, and interest.
Yeah, I mean, all the fees, the minimum bid should cover
Okay,
everything that we have into it.
yeah, and this is just a
Yeah.
soapbox commentary right here, but so few people read the newspaper now.
Right.
And I've made this comment to Representative Newman,
Yeah, and I'm gonna look into it if I get elected again for next year,
but so few people read the newspaper, even fewer of those read the
Right.
public notices, that, I mean, to me, that's a complete waste of money.
well, not only that, I
internet.
think it's the KJ, it doesn't even have a hard copy on Mondays now.
That's correct.
2 days.
Well, at least 1 or 2 days. So, I mean, it's.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, now that we have the internet, we've got social media, we've got Key, and, I think we do a much better job of getting word out to the public through those other avenues than we actually do
Right.
through a public notice in the newspaper at this point. And it costs several $100s in order to advertise. So that's just food for thought if we ever wanted to change the policy. So
Yeah, yeah, but I do think with this bid, so you changing your thing to include all back taxes.
Back taxes,
and
advertising,
any
our
advertising.
town costs associated with the bid process.
But when you
Taxes.
say back taxes, you're talking just to 2018 when it
years.
became owner occupied.
yeah, 19, 20, and 21.
Okay,
3 years taxes and costs associated with putting it out to bid.
okay.
Yep.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none. Ricky,
Yes,
Dan,
Yes,
Barbara,
Yes,
Carol.
Yes.
All right, 5 yeses. Let's go get ourselves a grand. All right, next up, we have consideration of the animal control officer's contract. Take a motion, open that item.
So moved.
All right, moved and seconded. That item is open for discussion. All right, seeing none. Just
Yeah,
kidding.
salary is just the same as it was last year with the 2.5% merit pay raise
Right.
that's budgeted for town employees.
And we put in here that she'll submit her expenses
Yes.
monthly, so we
Yes,
don't run
yes.
into that problem again,
Yes.
or that issue again.
Yeah, I've spoken to Trish about that, a little tickler.
I move we approve the contract.
I will second it. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. Barbara,
yes,
Carol,
Yes.
Dan,
yes.
Ricky.
yes.
All right, 5 yeses. Next, we have consideration of a time, date, and place for the town meeting public hearing. Take a motion to open that item. All right, moved and seconded. It's open for discussion. I will make a motion that we hold the public hearing on the warrant articles for the 2022 town meeting on Tuesday, February 15th at 6:30 PM.
Did you move it?
I just moved it.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Talked to Mary about it. I was like, they'd really like to come in on an extra night. So thought we'd just do it at a regular board meeting. All right, seeing no more discussion. Ricky,
Yes,
Barbara,
yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
All right, 5 yeses. See you on the 15th of February. All right, next up, we have a consideration of the back cover photo for the annual town report. Take a motion to open that item. Moved and a second,
Second.
moved and seconded. That is open for discussion. So the front cover looks fab. Looks mischievous.
Actually, Charlene took that picture in our office.
It's a good one of them.
Mm.
Totally shows his character. Now, was this all we got for photos?
Oh, no, we've got dozens of them. So Mary picked out the 3 that she thought were most eye-catching and wanted to offer those options to you.
And is it gonna be in black and white or color?
It'll be color.
I like the first one.
I like the
We-
third
we
one.
looked at the third one, but it's not color.
Third one,
Which one are you guys talking about?
The canoes or
Oh, the canoes.
yeah, the canoes are great. I like the other one.
What is that?
Yeah,
object in
what
the
is
water?
that?
Right, that's
Is
why I
that the
don't
new
like,
float?
that's why I don't like that first one, is it looks like a little water spout or
Oh,
something,
I think it's a buoy or something.
or whale tail, or, I can't tell.
My
because
first
it's
thought
black
was
and
that a
white.
loon, and then I was like,
I
"Oh,
know,
that's
yeah.
kind of
I thought it
weird."
was- first I thought it
Okay,
was a
so
balloon stretching
first
its
one's
wings.
out. Nobody in town will know what it is.
Well,
Probably
I
no
like, I
color.
like the canoes, but what the tagline Belgrade name of my life should be, is that, does that go along necessarily with the canoes?
But we don't
That was the
show
color
that.
guide on the- So there's what it looks like in color. We're using as our cover photo on our Facebook page right now.
The canoes are yellow and red. You can, I
Oh,
can't get it to
yeah.
come up, but you can see
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, I feel like we should have seen all, if there were dozens that were submitted, we really should see them all. Do we have them corralled anywhere?
We do, so if you guys want to punt on this, I can send them all to you as a download tomorrow. And you can just sort of do this by proxy, by email or something.
I'm happy to let the staff make the initial cut. I'm happy to let the staff make the initial cut.
Well, I just don't want anyone to be like, did you see that picture that I sent in? And then
We
we're
are
all
going-
like,
We are going to use all of them on our website and on our social media as well, maybe future books or whatever, but we will make good use of all of them because we got some really outstanding photos.
okay. All right, somebody can make an emotion.
I move the canoes.
I'll second the canoes.
I'll third the kayaks.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none. Ricky, are you down with canoe kayaks?
Yeah, I'm good with a sailboat.
I like a dinghy. Wait, I'm already a little dingy. All right, Dan,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Carol.
Yes,
All right, 5 yeses. We're going with
we're
whatever.
going for the
We're going with the
watercraft.
watercraft. Oh, all right. Next up, we have the town warrant. Not the town warrant. Well, it is the town's current warrant, yes.
So one thing I emailed you guys about previously is there is a $5,500 charge to Hall of Fame, which is for the light replacement. And Dan McKenzie's having to order some extra parts to go along with that, along with the second light pole. And so we'd like you to just deduct that, hold that, and we'll come to you with a one whole bill. So that would put the new total of warrant number 12 at $614,396.
614.
396.
Kind of a nice way to change the light bulbs in those, to lay them on.
I know.
Change the whole light.
I had literally circled that on my thing because I was like, oh, for heaven's sakes, what's going? There goes our
Those things-
savings.
Teach them.
Those things have become dangerous items.
Rick is in rare form tonight. Isn't he?
Well, if it didn't
You have to
jump
tell
right
the-
out at them.
You have to tell the state police to stay awake. Apparently, the trooper said he fell asleep.
Oh,
That's what he told people on the scene.
Ruh-roh, Scooby. All
Well,
right,
there's
the
not
other
much
thing,
going on there.
well, the other thing I had noticed, I circled it, was the Dalton property electricity, and I noticed you were touching on that.
yes. So the tenant is going to pay everything above $150 per month.
And so we have a
What are
new
they
agreement
going?
with them, and they've signed that agreement, because last
Yes.
month, the agreement, they were gonna pay an additional $200.
Yes, well, and that was before this bill increased another $100.
Yeah,
And so, they were agreeable to, they're working with our leasing agent on that.
Grow lights are expensive.
so I'm like, is it grow lights or is it laundry?
Well, initially we were told it was laundry, it's grow lights.
Dun, dun, dun.
Next thing they'll be doing is heating up, burning the place down a little.
All righty. That's all I had.
And the other thing I already talked to you about, we'll talk about when we get into executive session.
All right. Any more discussion? Anybody else highlight anything?
No, it's
Nope.
good.
All right, so I will take a motion. I will make a motion that we approve warrant number 12 in the amount of $614,396.82.
Second.
Moved and seconded and thirded. All right, and if there's no more discussion, Rick?
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Barbara.
Yes.
All right, 5 yeses. And Well, we have the town manager's report.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna highlight two things on here is we've had some instances of chronic absences by board and committee members. And it raises the question whether or not the town needs sort of a policy across all of its boards and committees when it comes to attendance of the meetings. The library ordinance does, offer such a policy in what was approved last year by the voters. So just wanted to take y'all's temperature to see if that's something that you're interested in having for all of our boards.
Transfer station has that on there. Also feel that the attendance.
Yeah, it just seems to me it probably needs to be uniform across
Right.
the organization.
Yeah, my temperature says yes.
Yep.
Because
I think that makes
we
sense.
can't have, you can't have somebody holding a seat on a board or committee if they're not committed to being there, because then that
Right.
prevents the rest of the board from being able to possibly complete their work because they need a full board.
It's the minimum level of engagement that the board should have attending.
If somebody that want to be engaged, they should make room for someone else.
Well, and I know a lot of it was, Zoom going back to in-person meetings. That was a big thing for folks. We really enjoyed being home in our pajamas.
And then the other, so we'll bring up the policy back to the board.
Well, the other thing, it says 3 consecutive meetings. I think we ought to have a number, so many meetings during the calendar year too.
Yeah, or maybe 3 meetings.
Because you could have one that does it this month and then skips a couple and does it that month and skips another couple and does it that month, and they still wouldn't be removed before.
Right.
What do you suggest?
Well, I think if the requirement is once a month, for the majority of the boards.
Right.
I think
I would say 3 instead of 3 consecutive. I prefer to see
Right.
three meetings in a calendar year.
Okay. And so for the planning board, which meets 2 times a month, do you want that same standard or do you want to double that?
Well, the planning board is even more important. Planning board,
Agreed.
and Board of Appeals.
Agreed.
So, I mean, that's definitely one they're gonna have to make a commitment to.
Well, and it's really the unexcused absences.
unexcused.
So
Right.
if someone has a
Excused
reason
ones,
for
yeah.
not being there that's
Sick
valid.
or, that's fine.
Right.
But
I mean,
it's-
with 3 consecutives, then you can replace someone sooner. If it's 3 in a year, then you're.
Yeah, but they're there, if it's January, they're there, and then February, they're not, and then the next 2 months, they're there. I mean,
Yeah, at least the.
they're there. So it's, once you hit that third one without an excuse, I would say, time to go.
Right,
Yeah, unexcused, because
Right.
obviously things come
Yeah.
up.
right.
Okay, we'll bring a draft to you guys for the next meeting.
Perfect.
And then lastly, anyone want to work on the refund policy working group?
Ooh, I'll do that. I have all this time now. I'm not going anywhere.
I was like, is she being facetious? Or she's like, pick me. All right,
I'll do it.
Okay, that's all I have.
I'd like to swear her in for that. All right. I make a motion that we take a 2-minute break and then reconvene for executive session.
Second.
Moved and
Scooping all
seconded.
the foam and spray foam and